today's class, we have three prevalent antipatterns that we'll look into. The first one is hard on the outside, gooey in the middle. Second one is Webify everything. And the last one is no time for security. When we look into the first one, the antipattern name is hard on the outside, gooey in the middle. And this is also known as the tooth-side pop, defense in depth, perimeter security, protect everything from all threats. The refactored solution names are HBSS. This HBSS stands for the host-based security system. Then you have network enclaves unbalanced primal forces, that is the management of confidentiality. The anecdotal evidence is each user's browser is sending thousands of spyware beacons every day. Advanced persistent threat, which is phrased as our networks are totally secure, we have a firewall. When we look at the antipattern solution, traditionally the network architectures included three major domains, that is the internet boundary, the data center storage area network, which was referred to as SAN, and the rest of the network, that is the intranet. Now between the internet boundary and the intranet, there are a number of network security devices, including a firewall and IDS or a IPS. So the network security is concentrated at the firewall, and the firewall is assumed to protect the entire network. But in theory, the firewalls protect the network by hiding the internal IP address through the network address translation, that is NAT, and blocking the incoming packet traffic on the denied port numbers. So in practice, most packet traffic is concentrated on very few outgoing ports, primarily the port 53, port 80 and port 443, and these correspond to the domain name system, HTTP and the HTTPS protocols, which are the core protocols of the World Wide Web. And these outgoing ports are open on virtually all the firewalls because the malware and the spyware writers are well aware of this fact, and they take advantage of these open ports. So the botnet, malware and the browser based spyware, they send these beaconing packets from infected machines inside the firewall to port 80 on the external control servers. But to the firewall, these packets will appear like an ordinary web traffic. Whereas in the drive-by malware, the attackers take advantage of the fact that most internet browsers are configured to execute scripted code by default. So if a browser encounters a malware infected site, the attacker code is executed on the system. So drive-by malware sites which are widespread on the internet, and you have plenty of variety in this. That is, you have ransomware which will lock the system and it will demand for payment. So inside the firewall, there are a few internal protections on the intranets, but the greatest threat is the insider threat. that is inside the firewall. So insider threats are considered to be the most dangerous because they have the legitimate network credentials and they know about the most valuable information. Whereas external threats, they penetrate the networks and get inside the firewall, but in a common scenario we can say that specific employees will be studied using their online information, say such as the information that is put up on Facebook pages, LinkedIn profiles and other public data. In phishing attacks, there are targeted emails which are being crafted with malware attachments, preying on people who are very curious, and when the malware is opened, the system will be infected. Then you have the keyloggers who send keystroke data back to the attacker on port 80, quickly gaining the user's login credentials and eventually a system administrator's credential when they log in to perform the maintenance. So with administrative credentials, the malware can be propagated to many other machines inside the firewall. So in effect, what happens is that the entire intranet is owned by the attacker. Now there are various causes, symptoms and consequences of this. They include mainly no protected network enclaves inside the firewall on the intranet, no HBSS, that is host based security system, no configuration monitoring, and in some cases there are other cyber patterns such as never read the logs. Some of the known exceptions are that for small networks, say less than 50 users, a traditional network architecture might be workable, but additional measures such as system hardening and HBSS need to be implemented. The refactored solution and examples. Now, if you see for larger networks with say extensive information assets, the intranet security has to be carefully designed, and the most critical information assets in the enterprise should have additional protection such as say separate firewall network enclave with IDS or an IPS network monitoring, and the security should be focused on assets most deserving of the additional safeguards. And the state-of-the-art security solutions should include configuring the entire system monitoring. So there are certain tools that monitor the changes to the system files, but the other tools will encapsulate both file system changes and application program interface calls, which will prevent any malicious action such as the McAfee HBSS. So some tools perform periodic security vulnerability and configuration testing such as Retina from EI, and then we have Nessus from Tenable. So these are the refactored solutions and examples. That is, there are tools to monitor the changes to the system files. Next, moving on to the second anti-pattern with the name Webify everything. This is also known as the Crosssite scripting, Crosssite request forgery, or the US power grid on the internet, or it is also called as the global financial system on the internet. The refactored solution name include the physical separation or out of band separation. The unbalanced primal forces include the management of integrity and availability. The anecdotal evidence is why the hell would they put the electrical power grid on the internet? Now coming to the background, in computer technology, the crawl, walk, run evolution especially had become very trendy to eliminate the installed applications entirely and relied on the web-based interfaces for everything. So for the sake of convenience and for the ease of provisioning, users were not required to install applications anymore because it was completely delegated to some remote entity providing the software as a service. Then you have the Antipattern solution. The Webify everything uses the web interfaces for critical infrastructure, which is also called as the smart grid, and this does not Webify its control devices and screens, and the major providers of the network devices Webify their control interfaces. So the problem is compounded by the common malware technique called as the Crosssite scripting, which is also in short referred to as XSS. So what the internet browsers do is they execute the remote code in the form of an HTML, JavaScript and other static and dynamic scripting notations. And the introduction of the HTML 5.0 will decrease the security issues by adding facilities for remote code execution and read-write access to the local browser client disk. So when a remote code executes in an internet browser, it has complete access to all the open browser windows, all their data and all their implied authorities. So whenever remote administrative interfaces are logged in and the user serves to additional internet sites, there is a distinct possibility that the cross-site scripting attacks could gain control of highly valued infrastructure targets. Then we have the supervisory control and data acquisition systems called as SCADA, that are the core control systems of machines, utilities and manufacturing infrastructure. So the Stuxnet worm, which was seen widely in the Middle East and Asia but only targeted very specific SCADA devices, proved that the targeted attacks on the SCADA systems are much more than theoretical. Then we have the causes, symptoms and consequences, which include the web browsers, which are a user interface platform for applications called as thin clients, and these thin clients are used and are convenient for system administrators because there is no client software installation or the client software update that is required. Also, you have users who are in the habit of opening multiple browser tabs and connecting with multiple websites. So the websites with the malicious content are a significant and a prevalent threat in this case, and the malicious content can be embedded in the site or served up through the advertisements which are supplied by the third parties. The refactored solution and example includes the software virtual private network, that is VPNs, which provide out-of-band separation of communications across public networks, and this means that interception of the packet using technologies like network snipers is prevented or can be prevented. The refactored solution can also include prevention of XSS and other attacks, and the American Bankers Association recommends using a dedicated physically separate computer for all the financial transactions. But this seems like an extreme solution, which is you can say a realistic response to the threat, but chances are that a hardened, well-patched computer which is used to connect only to trusted financial sites is used. And it is much likely to become a compromise by the malware than a computer that is exposed to general internet surfing. So it is very much less likely to compromise by malware than a computer that is exposed to the general internet surfing. Then we have the third type of anti-pattern called as no time for security as an anti-pattern name, and this is also known as add security last, blame security for schedule slippage, deliver it now. The refactored solution name includes the security requirements are real requirements, cyber risk management. The unbalanced primal forces are management of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The anecdotal evidence is wait until it's time to test the system and then worry about security. So if you look at the background of this, the security was usually the final consideration in the development of a system, and sometimes the security is left out altogether because we are always in a rush to get the products out of the door. The anti-pattern solution is that the developers of the software projects often wait until the end of the development life cycle to address the security, and when the date is near, the enterprise will release the process which will test the security vulnerabilities. Managers and developers will try to begin with the cover-up process in order to obscure any inherent insecure software, user account, and configuration practices. So when these people are confronted, the developers can claim that they were ignorant and they are not security experts. So the causes, symptoms, and consequences include the security was not a part of the requirement, saving on development cost and time at the expense of security, project is behind schedule, shared administrator accounts, no training to the developers to be security aware. The known exemptions are that if the software is out of the box, it is already near the end of the development cycle and can be configured for security just prior to the deployment. But we are always taken into faith that the original software developers accounted for the security and built in appropriate configuration settings. The refactored solutions and examples include that security risk and requirement should be analyzed early in the development cycle at the same time as the functional requirements. So the business stakeholders should categorize the system as confidentially high, integrity medium, and availability medium. So they need to select the baseline security requirements that deliver a set of security requirements close to the desired set, which can then be tailored to a specific situation during the development. So the security requirements should be given first class status in the overall requirements set. The related solution is that one needs to select security and audit controls using the Committee on Sponsoring Organization, which is referred to as COSO, and the Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology, in short abbreviated as COBIT, frameworks for commercial systems and satisfy the requirements.